In this video, we will talk about ES6 Object Destructuring. Object destructuring is a new ES6 syntax for unpacking a JavaScript object or an array. As you can see, we have already one JavaScript file created with the name lab 2.5.1.js. Inside this JS file, let's create a new array A with three values 1, 2, 3. Now let's unpack this array. What I mean to say is, let's extract the values from this array and hold it into individual variables. I want to say that I want to create a variable a1 which will hold a of 0, and then I want to create variable a2 which will hold a of 1, and finally I want to have a variable a3 which will hold value of 2. Now the same code can be rewritten in a single statement using object destructuring syntax. Let's comment this code and let's rewrite the same code using object destructuring syntax. So for that, let's write let square bracket a1 comma a2 comma a3 is equal to a. It will generate the same output, but syntax is much more easier. Just to prove that it will generate the same output, let's display value of a1 in console, and let's do the same thing for a2 and a3. So say Ctrl S and then launch the command prompt and navigate to the folder where your JS file is kept, and then using node command execute your JS file, and as you can see, it is displaying 1, 2 and 3, which is the value of variable a1, a2 and a3. Now if you want, you can only extract part of the array. For an instance, if you want, you simply say a1 comma a2, and it will simply take the first value into a1 and the second value into a2 and simply ignore the third value. And if you want, you can also use the spread operator here. It means one will go to a1 and everything else will go to a2. Now when I execute this code, you will see that a1 will display 1 and a2 will display another array with two values 2 and 3. Let's go to command prompt, let's clear everything and let's execute our JS file. As you can see, I got 1 which is a simple scalar value and an array 2, 3. Let's do couple of more examples of object destructuring with array. Let's create another JS file and save that file as lab 2.5.2.js. And then just like before, let's create a JavaScript array A with 3 elements again. You already know what will happen if I do something like this. It will simply take the first value in the array and assign it to variable a1, and the second value will get assigned to variable a2. But tell me what will happen if I do something like this. If you are saying that a4 will be undefined, then you are absolutely correct and you can call yourself a very good JavaScript developer. If I say console.log a4, Ctrl S, go to your command prompt, and then I will say node space 2.5.2.js, enter, you can see that I got undefined as the output. That is very obvious. a1 got 1, a2 got 2, a3 got 3 and a4 become undefined. Variable is declared but never assigned the value. Now let's do one more awesome example of object destructuring with JS. Let's create a new JS file and let's name it as lab 2.5.3.js, enter. Now inside this JS file, let's create two variables with two different values, a1 as 6 and a2 as 7. Now the requirement is I want to swap the value of a1 and a2. It's a very famous example during our college days. Swap the value between two variables. Now the normal way to do it is declare one more variable and using that try to do the swapping logic. But now because we have object destructuring, we can get that done in this way. I will say a2 comma a1 equal to a1 comma a2. It will swap the value of a2 and a1 straightforward. Let me prove it to you. I will say console.log a1, which was 6 in the beginning. Now you will see that it will be 7, and a2, which was 7 in the beginning, and now you will notice that it will be 6. Let's clear everything first of all, and then let's try to execute our 2.5.3 As you can see, a1 becomes 7 and a2 becomes 6. So value got successfully swapped. So this was all about object destructuring with arrays. Now let's see some demos of object destructuring with JavaScript objects. For that, let's create a new JS file and save it as lab 2.5.4.js. And then let's create a JavaScript object A with couple of keys, A1 with value A, B1 with value B, and C1 with value C. Now let's unpack this JavaScript object and extract the values of A1, B1 and C1 into individual variables using object destructuring. This time, object destructuring syntax is going to be a little different. Instead of using square brackets, we will be using curly brackets while declaring variables. So this is how it is going to be. We will say A1, comma B1, C1 equal to A. It will simply extract the value of A1, B1 and C1 and put into these variables respectively. Let's console log all these variables. So I will simply say console.log A1, console.log B1, and finally console.log C1. Remember, this A1, B1, C1 is nothing but it's the variable which we have created here, which holds the values of property A1, B1 and C1 respectively. Now let's go to command prompt and let's clear everything, and then make sure you are in the folder where your JS file is kept, and then using node command execute the JS file. As you can see, I got A, B and C, which is the value of A1, B1 and C1, which came from property A1, B1 and C1 respectively. Now object destructuring with JavaScript objects behaves a little different than object destructuring with arrays. When it comes to arrays, index was very important. When it comes to unpacking array and getting their values into individual variables, it was done with the help of index. First value goes to first variable, second value goes to second variable, etc. But this is not the case when it comes to JavaScript object. In case of JavaScript object, variable will be assigned with the value based on its name. What I mean to say is, in this case, if you have noticed, I declared variables as A1, B1 and C1, that is same name as the property names. And that's how mapping worked here. A1 value went to A1, B1 value went to B1 and C1 value got assigned to C1. Even if you go and change the sequence here, nothing is going to happen. It is simply going to get the exact value. Even after this kind of a code, we will get A1 as A, C1 as C and B1 as B. When it comes to JavaScript objects, mapping happens by comparing the names of the variables to the names of the keys. But when it comes to JavaScript object, it is based on the index of the element. Let's confirm the output. As you can see, I am still getting A, B and C. That means each one of these variable got the correct values from the JavaScript object. Now let's see what happens if we name our variable something other than the property name. Let's put it as X and let's see what output we will get. Save the file, go to command prompt and let's clear the screen and let's try to execute our JS file. As you can see, it is simply undefined. So you have to name your variable same as the property name. Now if you want, you can also use spread operator in object destructuring. I'll simply say triple dot y, and let me print it as well. I will simply say print y. Now what will happen is this code will simply create 4 variables x, c1, b1 and y. Right now we don't have any property with the name x, so x remain undefined. c1 will get value as c, b1 will get value as b, and now other than b1 and c1 there is one more property a1 is there, which is not utilized so far. So when you use spread operator, everything else will go to that y. So ultimately you will notice that x will be undefined, b1 will be b, c1 will be c, and y will be a JavaScript object having one property a1 with value as a. To make it better, what I will do is I will put one more key here, d1 with value as d, and then I will go to my command prompt and I will execute the code. As you can see, value of x is undefined, value of b1 is b, value of c1 is c, whereas value of y is another JavaScript object with two properties a1 and d1. So in simple words, when you use spread operator, whatever remains becomes a JavaScript object and get assigned to this while variable. Now as a rule, you can use spread operator only as the last parameter. You cannot keep it in the beginning like this. It won't work. It will give you an error. I'll show you. You'll notice that it is giving you an error. Rest element must be the last element. So you have to keep it here. Then only it will work. Now before we wrap up, one nice example of object restructuring with functions. Let's comment this code and let's create a function, my function, with a parameter x. Now what is this x? X is going to be a JavaScript object, and inside this function I'm going to extract the value of one of the property of that x object, and then I'm going to use it in console.log. Now this code can be more simplified using object destructuring. Simply say curly bracket and a1. It is going to be same. When I invoke this function like this, I'll simply pass this a, which have a1 property. So simply a1 will get the value of a1 property, that is a. Let me show you. Let's open the command prompt and let's clear everything, and then let's execute our JS. As you can see, I got a as the output. The similar function trick can be used with arrays as well. Let's do a final demo for the same. As you can see, I have an array with 4 elements, and then I will create a function called my function, just like before, but this time instead of using curly brackets, I'll be using square brackets because I have array, and inside this I will say x comma y, and then simply I will log the values of both the variables using console.log function. Let's do the same for y. Now I'll simply invoke the my function passing a as the parameter. You will notice that x will get 1 and y will get 2 automatically. Let's go to our console and clear everything, and then let's execute our JS file. As you can see, it displayed 1 and 2. So this was all about object destructuring in ES6. It will make our life very easy when it comes to arrays and JavaScript objects.